Two people are killed in shootings in Denmark, targeting a debate about Islam and free speech, and a synagogue. The Prime Minister condemned what she called a cynical act of terror. But what's at the heart of the attacks? This is Inside Story. Hello there and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. An attack on democracy and all Danes. Denmark's Prime Minister condemns the shootings in Copenhagen, which killed 2 people and injured 5 police officers. A cultural centre hosting an event titled Art, Blasphemy and the Freedom of Expression was sprayed with gunfire, killing 1 person. It was being attended by a controversial Swedish cartoonist who had previously depicted the Prophet Muhammad as a dog. Shortly afterwards, a member of Copenhagen's Jewish community was shot dead outside a synagogue. Police later killed a man they suspected of being behind both attacks. Last month, 17 people were killed in Paris when gunmen attacked the Charlie Hebdo magazine for publishing satirical images of the Prophet and a Jewish supermarket. The Danish Prime Minister, Helle Thorning-Schmidt, described the shootings in Copenhagen as a cynical act of terror. But she added, "We are not in a war between Islam and the West." Al Jazeera's Nick Spicer helps get our discussion going.
It was a tense night in the Danish capital. Police cordoned off streets and security forces took charge. After 2 attacks, police tracked a suspect to his home. On Sunday morning, they said they think they've got their man.
We suspect that the same perpetrator is behind both shootings. And we also believe that the person that police shot near Nørrebro station is the same perpetrator.
It all started when a man fired some 40 bullets through the window of this cafe where a debate on free speech was happening. Controversial Swedish cartoonist Lars Vilks, who drew caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad in 2005, helped organize it. The gunfire killed 1 man. The gunman escaped in a car. Hundreds of armed security officials deployed across the city. The second attack came at a synagogue on Crystal Street, killing another man and injuring 2 police officers.
People from the police entered the street just in front, wearing helmets and automatic rifles. We looked outside the window and saw this guy lying in the street just on the other side of the pavement.
Police say CCTV images like this helped them find the alleged attacker. He reportedly took a taxi home, and that's where police went to find him, and where he opened fire and died when police fired back. In a press conference on Sunday, the Prime Minister said it was a time for Danes to come together.
We are not in a war between Islam and the West. This is not a war between Muslims and non-Muslims. This is a war between freedom for all and a dark ideology.
Here at police headquarters, there was no information provided on Sunday morning as to the identity of the killer. However, the police did say they would provide more information later in the day. For now, the people of Copenhagen and Denmark feel relieved, but many have been saying they've been expecting such attacks since the first publication of the caricatures of the Prophet Muhammad almost a decade ago. Nick Spicer, Al Jazeera, Copenhagen.
Well, let's now bring in our guests for this discussion. In Copenhagen, Imran Hussein joins as spokesman for the Network, an organisation that brings together human rights campaigns in Denmark. In Oslo, Sindre Bangstad, a social anthropologist and author of the book Anders Breivik and the Rise of Islamophobia. And in Copenhagen also, we have Jacob Sheik, an investigative reporter and journalist at the Danish newspaper Politiken. Welcome to you all. Sindre Bangstad, I'd like to start with you if I could. A cynical act of terror, says the Danish Prime Minister. Do you agree?
Yes, she's certainly right to say so. This is a terrorist attack which sort of follows the same pattern as we saw in Paris recently, where you first had an attack on members of the free press, so to speak, and then followed by what appears to be an anti-Semitic attack targeting Jewish communities.
Okay, Jacob Sheik, what about you? What's your thought? The Prime Minister says Denmark has been struck by terror. We will defend our democracy and we will always defend Denmark.
First, I want to begin with thanking you, Nick, for having me on the program. What we do know by now is that we're not sure that Lars Vilks was actually the target of the perpetrator, and we don't know for sure by now if this was an act of terror or carried out by a militant Islamist. So, having said that, obviously this is a series of events that have created a lot of chaos in Copenhagen, and the whole city is right now in a state of emergency, obviously.
Right, it's almost 10 years, isn't it, since the publication of those infamous, shall we say, cartoons in a Danish newspaper. There's a view out there, isn't there, Jakob, that sooner or later this was bound to happen?
Yeah, obviously. I mean, this, even if this attack was not even carried out by a militant Islamist wanting to harm a Mohammed cartoonist, we've seen several events, several attacks on the newspaper Jyllandsposten, which posted the cartoons in 2005, but we've also seen attacks on the drawer Kurt Vestergaard. We've seen other terror attacks having some sort of relation to the publication of the Mohammed cartoons in 2005. So the general, state of mind in Denmark have been so far that it would just be a matter of time before we've seen acts like we saw today.
Yeah, and Imran Hussein, is that your view, that it wasn't really a question of if, but just a question of when?
It's difficult to say. Like Jakob just stated, that we have faced several situations since the last 10 years, since the first cartoons appeared. But unfortunately, we faced a situation yesterday where apparently a suspect attacked a debate for people who wanted to discuss the blasphemy and art. So a heinous act, I can say.
Yeah, but so given when this has taken place, given the fact that the Charlie Hebdo attacks are fairly recent, you would have to think, Imran Hussein, that they were some kind of motivation, wouldn't you?
It's very difficult to say if it's kind of motivation. We see the parallel we can see is, of course, that Charlie Hebdo, the officers of Charlie Hebdo, was also cartoonists, and here we also face cartoonists being attacked. So that kind of parallel we can draw, of course.
Okay,
it's difficult to say if it's motivation for anybody, because why people do these kind of acts is a more psychological effect, a social effect. What kind of reasoning behind it is difficult to say.
And so Sindre Bangstad, the cartoonist Lars Vilks, who believes himself to have been the target, he was on an Al-Qaeda target list, wasn't he?
Yes, certainly. I think it's important to stress here that we don't know much about the motivation, given that the suspected perpetrator has been killed. And we don't know, and it's also important to underline that there is no singular cause of terrorism, right? So processes of radicalization leading up to this would seem to suggest that we're dealing with composite phenomenon, right? So, but certainly.
What do you mean? Can I just interrupt there? So when you say composite phenomenon, what do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, in all kinds of terror, there's bound to be social, psychological elements also involved. But certainly I wouldn't, at this stage, and it's important to underline that these are still early hours, so we don't really know. But given that the description of the police seemed to suggest that we're dealing with a male of Arab origin, it wouldn't be surprising, at least, if this had to do with Salafi jihadism. And in that case, we perfectly know, we know perfectly well by now that people involved in drawing cartoons of the Prophet have long been prime targets.
Right. Okay.
For Salafi jihadists.
Okay. So Jacob Shea, let me just bring you back in. It's interesting watching the Danish Prime Minister, isn't it? There's a fine line between saying things as a strong leader and saying things that you perceive other people would think make you look like a strong leader. Do you think that's a line that she has been treading?
It's quite hard to say. I mean, that might be a question for the Prime Minister rather than for me. But what I can say is that the general ambience in that speech was that, you know, she wanted to express obviously her deep felt thoughts to the families, but also it was a sort of an encouragement for the whole society to stick together basically and deal with this phenomenon as a whole nation, and I think that pretty much aligns with what the society thinks by now.
Well, the shootings in Denmark have been condemned by world leaders with a particularly direct reaction from Israel's Prime Minister. Take a listen to this.
Jews have been murdered again on European soil only because they were Jews, and this wave of attacks is expected to continue, including murderous anti-Semitic attacks. Of course, Jews deserve protection in every country, but we say to Jews, to our brothers and sisters, Israel is your home. We are preparing and calling for the absorption of mass immigration from Europe, and I would like to tell all European Jews and all Jews wherever they are, Israel is the home of every Jew.
Imran Hussein, the problem is, isn't it, that this echo chamber of politics can magnify already very serious issues and can become inflammatory in their own right, can't they?
We saw after what happened in Paris a lot of attacks on Muslims as well. I think we have been facing for the last 10-15 years a lot of attacks on Muslim community, either on their institutions or single persons. So I feel we are facing a very difficult situation also in Copenhagen right now, because the Prime Minister tried to show that we as Danes, as citizens of Denmark, we should all stick together and we should be united. But facing, or you can say experiencing from what have happened during other situations throughout Europe, I find that we as a Muslim community also are in a situation where we have to be alert.
And Jacob Sheikh, what's your view of that?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned right now, the police said that this perpetrator was known by the Danish authorities. He was known by a Danish intelligence agency, and they said he was from Copenhagen. So I think despite the fact that we don't know the real motive of the perpetrator right now, it's still important to underline that this person was not some sort of pariah. It was a part of Danish society, obviously. And my research on other people that have been going to Syria and have come back radicalized suggests that these persons are usually formed and shaped by Danish society. They speak fluently Danish. They seamlessly navigate through Danish society.
There's nothing to suggest that this man is one of those people that has been to Syria to fight at this point.
No, at this point, the Danish intelligence said that they could not sort of go further into that matter, whether he's been to conflict zones or not. And I want to make clear once again that we do not know if this man was a militant Islamist and if this was an act of terrorism. But even trying to avoid jumping into conclusions, his path, his modus operandi follows the trace of other jihadist operations in Europe recently, as Sindra said.
But then are you saying that even if he was acting as a lone wolf, it's still symptomatic of the society in which he lives?
If he was a radicalized person, I would say that based on the people that I've spent time with and the persons that I've been interviewing as a reporter, this is not a lone wolf in a sense that he's not completely, that he's not distanced from Danish society. Usually what we see about radicalized people is that they're not from the bottom of society necessarily. They're not necessarily from poor, very religious families. Very often we see that these people are pretty well integrated and are socially marginalized rather than economically and religiously marginalized initially.
So, Sindre, this brings me on to the whole issue of integration. What kind of impact do you think this will have?
I just wanted to come in here.
All right, yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Imran.
Nick, I was just thinking it's very important also to state that a lot of these people who we talk about being radicalized,
we see a pattern that also shows that people are having mental problems as well. So just making it more like a religious kind of problem, or seeing as singularly people are getting more radicalized religiously, I think we should see it more in a social context, or more also into their medical background as well. Recently, I recall a week back, I saw a report stating that these radicalized people, apparently more and more people of them have some kind of mental issues as well.
But may that not be just a reflection of the society in which they live and the kind of conditions in which they live and how integrated they might feel?
I don't know if it has something to do about the integration, because being an integral part of a society makes you more active about society. You understand the dilemmas within the society. I find it more difficult to say that is well integrated. That is a definition, question of definition. I see more that why these people, we should look into why these people go to these kind of extreme acts, you can say. And I think there we can look for their mental state, we can look at the political situation in the world, and we can see in local situations. Why this happened, nobody knows the motivation behind, so I can't go into that. But we have seen that the acts around the world has been motivated in politically and also in local situations as well.
Okay, well, Denmark was the first country in the world to introduce what it called an Integration Act, and that was back in 1999. And the aim was to ensure that newly arrived immigrants were able to enjoy equal opportunities with other citizens. It's also taken a different approach over what to do with homegrown recruits returning from fighting abroad, something that we have been alluding to now, for example, with ISIL in Syria and in Iraq. The so-called de-radicalization program in the city of Aarhus involved a collaboration between police and social workers, and it kind of puts an emphasis, if you like, on rehabilitation rather than jail time, and helps returning fighters find work, housing, or even psychological counselling. The program, though, isn't without its critics. Danish officials say it has, however, led to a decrease in the number of citizens who have gone overseas to fight. So, Jakob Sheikh, you know a fair bit about this. Do you think that programs like this are satisfactory, that they're working?
Well, first I want to, sort of make a point about this sort of misunderstanding about the Aarhus model. It's not like that, when you return from Syria having committed war crimes, that you would just be given a job and reintegrated in Danish society through the Aarhus model. It only goes for the persons that cannot be persecuted in Denmark by Danish law, that you cannot sort of provide evidence that these people have been committing war crimes. And then the society, the idea about this seen from a society point of view is that it might be better to reintegrate these people rather than having them running around in the street and being a threat to Danish society. The most hardcore ones, if you could say so, would be persecuted, obviously.
Right, but in your view, is it working? Has it worked?
Yeah, you could just look at the straight numbers. We've seen a slight decrease in the numbers of Danish people who went abroad to Syria and Iraq to fight from 2013 until now. So definitely something is working out there. But there's also local issues that are, very much in the minds of these people that travel abroad to Syria and Iraq. That, for instance, the establishment of the caliphate in in June last year have made some sort of legit reason for them to go. But also we've seen fights in Syria fighting each other, which prevents someone from going. So it's not just about the Aarhus model, but also about local factors down there. But what you can say is that this sort of different approach in Denmark towards radicalization seems to have been working.
Imran in Copenhagen, how does Denmark compare to the rest of Scandinavia and indeed Europe as far as integration is concerned?
We have an integration policy here in Denmark. We have had for several years, but the problem has been that it's more or less the tone in the debate that is getting harsher and harsher. You can always make policies, talk about that it's very important that we get an integral part of the society. But the thing is, how do you communicate with the minority groups that are in the society? And I think that debate has been very harsh. We are talking about a way of discussing immigrants, a way of discussing refugees. Lately we have been discussing the situation in Syria a lot in Danish media and how to deal with the refugees from that conflict. And I would say getting through a traumatized situation, running away from a country that is the country of your origin because of a war state, come to a new country and not feeling welcome, that is very difficult to see that there is a clear policy that you really want to help these people. Therefore, I think it's not about how the policy is, Nick. It's more or less how you implement the policy and how you deal with the immigration and the immigration problems you can have. And therefore, I would say, like you have seen in Europe for the last decade, it's been a changing political situation. Sometimes it's the right-wing parties, sometimes it's left-wing parties who win the elections. But the policies doesn't change about the immigrant situation.
All right, we're running out of time, so I just want to bring in. I want to jump in there and bring in Sindre Bangstad. Thank you, Imran. I just want to bring in Sindre Bangstad. We're just running tight on time. Acts like this, what kind of impact will this have on Danes?
Well, I mean, the political signals that are being sent by the Prime Minister now are very important. She has underlined that we are all Danes and this is not a war between Islam and the West. But nevertheless, one is likely to see a ratcheting up of rhetoric on both sides, right? And it's a matter of historical record that Denmark has had for quite a long time, quite a toxic public discourse about Muslims. In fact, in the Scandinavian context, much more so than other Scandinavian countries. So it's fair to assume that there will be any number of challenges, and this might lead to even further polarization than what one is seeing.
Further polarization.
I would also like to
go ahead. Go very briefly, if you would.
Nick?
That if it was indeed the fact that Lars Vilks was the target, it's also a matter of public record that he's long moved in far-right circles, right? So.
All right. Okay. We'll leave that. So let me just bring in. Let me bring in Jakob Sheikh. Let me just bring in Jakob Sheikh now.
Sure.
I can see you're eager to jump in.
Yeah. I'm just to follow up on what Sindre said. I mean, this is not. I don't have scientific evidence for this, but based on the radicalized people I've spoken to, it also has something to do with social stuff. I mean, if they suffer from a divorce, if they get into an argument with their elder brothers or sisters, if they don't feel that they can follow through in school, if they feel that they're losing out on their jobs and so on and so forth. So it has to do. This radicalization process has to do with a lot of other things, but still, it's important for me to say that we still don't know if this is an Islamist that's carried out the attack. It could be a mental case. It could be a gang member. I don't know yet. So let's not jump into to early conclusions.
Okay. And last word to Imran Hussein, also in Copenhagen.
Yeah, based on this sad situation, I think, Nick, it's very important that we also, when time comes, look into why people jump into these kind of acts. What is it that Denmark has been in a state of war for the last 10 years. What has that done to our society? How is it these impacts we are feeling right now? So based on this sad situation, I think we should look into those facts as well. What is it that we are doing around the world, and how can it affect us?
All right, gentlemen, we've run out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Do appreciate your perspectives on this. Thank you very much indeed, Imran Hussein and Jakob Sheikh in Copenhagen and Sindre Bangstad in Oslo. Thanks very much indeed, gentlemen. And thank you for joining us. If you've got anything you'd like to add, you can go to our programme page at aljazeera.com. You can also post your comments at facebook.com/AJ Inside Story or send your tweets to @AJ Inside Story. I'm Nick Clark from the whole team. Bye for now.